There's another way to figure out your major scales. Just going to use C as an example. Write all the notes out. So with a major scale, it consists entirely of whole steps. As long as there is a half step between the third and fourth scale degree and the seventh and eighth, it's a major scale. If everything else is a whole step. So you got from C to D, that's a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F, you've got a half step. F to G is a whole step. G to A is a whole step. A to B, whole step. B to C, half step. So that's one way you can check to make sure that what you're dealing with is actually a major scale. To make it a natural minor scale, you just lower the third scale degree, the sixth, and the seventh. If you do that, then you have a natural minor scale. So one way to figure out your minor scales is to first create the major scale and then just lower the appropriate scale degrees. So we're going to get into that in a little bit, but first we're going to create our minor circle of fifths. And I'm going to start by creating a major one. So on the outside we're going to put all of our major keys, on the inside we'll put all of our minor keys. So you start by drawing a big circle. What note goes at the very top? C. And how many sharps or flats does it have? None. 0. So now I'm going to create my points. Okay, so what do I have to do first to figure out my next key when we're talking about major scales? What interval do I have to move when I go around the circle to the right? So perfect fit is 5 letter names. You've got 2 components to it. You have to have 5 letter names and 7 half steps. You have to have both components for it to be a perfect fit. If you have from C to G flat, that's not 7 half steps, that's 6 half steps. So that's actually something called a tritone. It's not a perfect fit, that would be the wrong key. So I count up 5 letter names from C, which is G, C, D, E, F, G. I put my G down because I know it's going to be a G of some sort, and then I use my chromatic scale to figure out my half steps. So maybe we'll just create a chromatic scale here for reference. So now you can count the number of half steps. Starting on C, don't count the first note because the distance between C to C is 0. It's not moving at all. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We arrive at G, that is 7 half steps, so we know that C to G is our first sequence in our circle of fifths. And I'm going to put a 1 here because that means we're going to have 1 sharp. So now I got to go up another perfect fifth. So what's my next key signature? So you go G, A, B, C, D. I'm going to write my D down. I'm just going to put the number 2 up there because I know there's going to be 2 sharps in that. And then I just count my half steps. There are 7 half steps, so I don't have to add a sharp or a flat to this. And remember, when you're going to the right, none of these are going to be flat. The only option is a sharp, if there's anything at all. When you go on to the left, you're not going to have any sharps, because those are our flats. So you're either going to have just the basic letter name with no sharp or natural sign attached to it, or you're going to have a flat sign, okay? So to the right is sharps, to the left is flats. So just know that. And you won't have any 2 keys that are the same. What I mean is there won't be a D key that uses sharps and a key of D that uses flats. That just doesn't exist. Alright, so now we go a perfect fifth above D. We get A. We check to make sure there are 7 half steps. There are. So my 3 here. And then we go up another fifth. B, F sharp, and C sharp. So now, not counting C, I have 7 sharp key signatures. That's how many you should have. C sharp and F sharp, they have to be sharp because 7 half steps above B is an F sharp. If you want to keep going around the circle, you could. you could add another perfect fifth to C sharp. What would that give us? What note? G sharp. Good. It's actually just going around, but now you're adding the sharp. So now I have D sharp, and then A sharp, E sharp, and then this is where it gets kind of interesting. You see why we don't have these extra theoretical keys, because this would be B sharp. Well, what is B sharp? It's C. So why use the key of B sharp when you can just use one that has no sharps or flats? So all of these theoretical keys will correspond to another key that already exists. A sharp is B flat, D sharp is E flat, G sharp is A flat, E sharp is a key of F. All right, so now we're going to figure out our flats. So I go down a perfect fifth from C. So what is that? You got to count backwards from the alphabet now. So I arrive on an F. So my first key here is F. I'm going to add 1. Is that a sharp or a flat? We're talking about flats, right? So 1 flat. So now I go down another fifth. What's a fifth below F? I almost said the answer. Yeah, good. B flat. And I'll put a number 2 there so I know that there are 2 flats. Now what is a fifth below B flat? A perfect fifth, not just a fifth. You count down 5 letter names, you get an E, and then I have to make sure that there are 7 half steps. Another thing you can do is you can look at your sharp keys. You already have an E. We know that since it's a flat key, it can't be E sharp, so that's not even a possibility. And we already have an E, so it can't be E. So without even counting, you just automatically know that's going to be an E flat. Like I said, none of these keys will share the same letter name. And sharp or flat. All right, so you go down a perfect fifth from E. What do you get? A. We already have an A over here, so we know that's a flat. You go down another perfect fifth. We get D flat, so this is 5. And then we go to F sharp. These are just going to be enharmonically equivalent. So that's another way to think about this. This is G flat. You'll notice they both share, there's 6 flats and 6 sharps. And then we have one more, the C flat, which has 7 flats. So those are all of our major keys. So you should know how to do that. Now, once you have your major key signatures, there's a really easy way to figure out your minor ones. You can create it just like you did with the circle of fifths for the major keys. And just realize that instead of starting on C, you start on the letter A. So A has no sharps or flats. Or you can take the major key, which is C, and then you can count up to the 6th scale degree using the key signature for that particular key. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. So if I count up to the 6th scale degree on here, what do I have? 8. I have this note here. So let's take our next key, the key of G. I'm going to start on G, and just write all my notes in first. And then remember my order of sharps, I start on F, and then I just move in fifths. So F, C, G, D, A, E, B. There's 1 sharp in G major, so I find my F sharp because that's the first sharp. And I just make this sharp. And then I count up to the 6th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my scale, my minor's key signature for this is E. And they share the same key signature. So there's going to be 1 sharp for E minor. So we go to our next one, D. many sharps are in D? It's 2 sharps, right? So I've got my F sharp and my C sharp. Count up to the 6th scale degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I get B minor. And you just continue doing that all the way around the circle until you created all of your sharp keys, and then you go the opposite direction to do your flat keys. But by opposite direction, if you're using the scale method where you count to the 6th scale degree, let me just give you an example if we're going to do F major. F major has 1 flat. I still just count to the 6th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So F major and D minor both have 1 flat. C major and A minor both have 0 sharps, no flats. G major and E minor both have 1 sharp. B minor and D major both have 2 sharps. So then I just keep going along, and I just add in the rest of my keys. So let's do B major. Let's find out what the minor for B major is. Anybody know? Okay, so first of all, I need my 5 sharps. So F, C, G, D, and A. And now I count up 6 scale degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. G sharp. So now we have kind of a weird key of G sharp minor, right? So how many sharps are in G sharp minor? 5. So if I want to write a G sharp minor scale, I use the same sharps from the major scale, from the B major scale. F, C, G, D, and A. So now I just wrote a G sharp natural minor scale. It's natural because it fits the key signal. So take a second and try and figure out the rest of your key signatures. I'm not going to give them all to you right now. I'm going to give you like 10 minutes to try and figure this out, and then maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll go over it as a class. So write out the scale if you have to. So really, all I have to do, take B flat, count up 6 letter names, B, C, D, E, F, G. I know this is some type of G minor. Is there a G flat in the key of B? I go over my order of flats. Remember, the order of flats just goes the opposite direction as the order of sharps. So my first 2 flats are B and E. There is no G. B and E they're not G. So I know that is just G minor. So then I start on E, count up to the 6th scale degree, E, F, G, A, B, C. This is a C minor. We don't know if it's C flat yet. We got to check. There are 3 flats in E flat major, so B, E, and A. There's no C there, so that is just C minor. Then I count up from A, B, C, D, E, F. That would be F minor. Again, 4 flats now. Still no F flat, so that's just F minor. And then remember, these guys are just going to be enharmonic equivalents. So A sharp is B flat, D sharp is E flat, G sharp is A flat. Something else you'll notice, I wrote my minor keys using lowercase letters. I wrote my major keys using uppercase letters. That's how we do it in music. This brings me to another concept. You got parallel and relative key signatures. If they're parallel, it means they share the same letter. So here's let me just show you what I mean by this. They start on the same tonic. Everybody remembers the tonic is the first scale degree of the scale, right? So in the key of C, the tonic is going to be C. In the key of G, the tonic is going to be G. So here is my C major scale. If I want to create a parallel minor scale to my C major scale, I have to also have C as a tonic, because a parallel key signature shares the tonic. And on your quiz, you're going to be asked that. You're going to be asked, what's the parallel minor of C major? In that case, the answer would be C. But in order to figure out your minor key signature, you got to go over to your circle of fifths and find the C flat minor. I mean the C minor. It's right here. So it has 3 flats. So I go and I add my B, my E, and my A. So these 2 key signatures, this one's major, this one's parallel minor. One thing that might confuse you is it might ask you, what's the parallel major of C minor? It's really just thinking of it the opposite direction. So the parallel major of C minor would be C major. The other type of minor key signature we have is relative. So with relative key signature, they share the same key, but that means they won't share the same tonic. So we got to find a relative minor key signature by looking at a circle of fifths and just seeing which keys line up. So C major and A minor, those match up. They're relative. G major and E minor, those are relative to each other. D and B are also relative. Pretty simple, right? It's because they share the same key. The only thing I don't want to get confused about is because we've got these enharmonic equivalents, you need to make sure that the major scale and the relative minor scale attached to it are both either sharps or both flats. So B and G sharp are relative, but B and A flat, they're not relative. Because B major uses 5 sharps, A flat minor doesn't. Okay, it uses 7 flats. Is that pretty clear? You understand the difference between relative and major? Alright, so now the last thing we have to talk about is how you take a natural minor scale, and this guy here is natural because it uses a key signature. How do you take a natural minor scale and make it harmonic? There's a few ways to think about this. You can work from the major scale and use whatever method is easier. I'm not going to go into all the different ways because I'm going to just try and stick to the methods that seem to work best for students. But for harmonic minor, I write out my C major scale. There's my C major scale. Now in order to make it harmonic from major, I just lower the 3rd and the 6th scale degree. Pretty simple. So that's my 3rd scale degree, and then my 6th scale degree. So a natural minor scale will sound like this. It sounds a little smoother compared to the harmonic minor scale. It has that minor second between the 7th and the 8th scale degree that gives it more color, I guess you could say. So if you want to go from your major scale, just lower the 3rd and 6th. If you want to go from your minor scale, then you raise the 7th scale degree. So here I'm going to write out my natural minor scale. I'm going to raise my 7th scale degree, so my B flat becomes a B natural. Now I have a harmonic minor scale. Pretty easy, right? So there's one more type of one more type of minor scale. That one's called melodic. It's a mixture of both the major scale and the natural minor scale. So first, we've got our major scale here. On the way up, first 4 notes are minor, the last 4 notes are major. So with this, to get a melodic minor scale from major, you just lower the 3rd scale degree. then something different happens on the way down. On the way down, you have to lower the 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degree because you want a natural minor scale on the way down. That's why they call it melodic, because it uses so many different scale degrees here. So that is a melodic minor scale, and it'll sound like this. It's melodic because it's more of a natural scale. It's more of how composers will actually use this in a composition. We have natural harmonic and melodic minor scales, but composers don't just think, I'm going to write a piece in harmonic minor, I'm going to write a piece in natural minor. The reason we have these are really for musicians to practice these scales, and just as a theoretical idea. In reality, composers will just move freely between natural, harmonic, and melodic. So you're not going to see a piece called, Mozart's Symphony No. 4 in C melodic minor. It's just going to be C minor. It's going to use the key signature for natural minor, and it'll use accidentals to create harmonic or melodic minor scales however the composer sees fit. And another useful thing about these scales, the reason we have these different versions, is it makes it easier to modulate to other keys. So if I want to go from like C major to another key, I can use some of these accidentals to kind of introduce some of the notes for the new key, so the new key isn't such a surprise. It's like foreshadowing in music. You'll introduce, if I want to go from like, let's say C major to B flat major, maybe I'll go into like a minor version of C, so I have my B flat, that introduces the B flat and B flat major before you actually have the change, so it kind of foreshadows that B flat's coming in your future, and then it makes it easier to create a smooth transition into these other keys. So that's where we have all these accidentals and these different types of scales. So if you want to go from a major scale, you got to go on the way up, you lower the 3rd from the major. On the way down, you lower the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th. If you want to go from natural minor, you got to do something a little different. On the way up, you're going to raise the 6th and 7th scale degree from natural minor. On the way down, you're going to keep it the same as natural minor. So it just depends, do you want to figure out your minor scales using the major key or using the minor key signature? Whichever one works easier for you. I think in the beginning it's probably easier to use the major key and just lower the appropriate scale degrees.